What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions episode. My name is Cameron Selby, and we're going to be doing a first look at the Week 10 NFL main slate. We have a bunch of teams on bye, including a couple of notable juicy offenses we love to target it, namely the Cincinnati Bengals, Dallas Cowboys. So we're going to have to filter through and see what we can do to build some lineups that we love. Last week named some pretty solid plays, especially Brock Bowers, who came back from injury and dropped 46 for us on our as our number one exposed tight end. But yeah, we appreciate you guys tuning in. Emery is back doing some content with us, so he just did an offensive prospects breakdown for the 2026 draft. Please go check that out. Him and Dusty also did a recap of this past college slate, and we're gonna keep on going into November. I can't believe we're already here, but cold weather, sweat weather, long sleeve weather, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, we're gonna keep rocking and rolling. Hopefully, we can get back to live streams this week. My truck broke down on the way to the live stream, so that's why I was off the air this past Sunday morning. But I can't wait to break this slate down. It's going to be a first look. So without further ado, let's get going. So as always, we're going to start off talking about the 5 highest totals on the slate. And it's going to be a tie for 2 3 o'clock games. There's only 3 games in the 3 o'clock slate, and 2 of them are tied for the highest. And that is going to be the Detroit Lions and the Washington Commanders. Obviously, the Commanders are going to be with Marcus Mariota going forward. Jaden Daniels out indefinitely because of his dislocated elbow he suffered on the primetime Sunday night game against the Seahawks. And then also, you've got the Los Angeles Rams, the San Francisco 49ers. Last time these two teams played, they had a really fun showdown on a Thursday night game that ended in overtime. The very shorthanded San Francisco 49ers came back and won. San Francisco 49ers that were shorthanded came through on the road in overtime to win that game. So I'd assume that the Rams don't want to get swept. This is a big one. I think whoever wins this will be having the first place lead, depending on what Seattle does. So it's a very must-see important game. Next up, you have I actually missed this one. Another rematch is going to be the Bills and the Dolphins, who has the highest total at 50. So very similar totals. The Bills and Dolphins have another rematch, and last time we saw these two teams play was also on Thursday night, and that ended up with a 31-21 showing, which Josh Allen didn't go off, but they did move the ball at will, and it just felt like Buffalo was going through the motions. Miami having a little bit of extra days rest because of the fact that they were on the Thursday game this past week. So with that said, there's reason to believe that they can make this more competitive than you would believe. But also Buffalo's kind of played down to most of their competition with the exception of blowing out Carolina a couple of weeks ago. So we'll just see what happens with that specific game. The last 2 spots I want to bring up, there's different totals that are very similar. You have the Baltimore Ravens, who are the sudden are back, going against the Vikings, who are coming off a big road win against the Detroit Lions with J.J. McCarthy returning. And then last but not least, the Patriots, who are going crazy right now at 7-2 against the Buccaneers, fresh off a bye at 6-2. So that should be a really, really fun game as well. But once again, even though the names are returning Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, the prices have dipped. Josh Allen has dipped. I know that we've said that he hasn't had crazy great games, but he just had his best game since week 1 at 28.8 points against the Kansas City Chiefs. Nearly flawless performance, almost 90% completion percentage, had 2 rushing touchdowns, was pretty solid. He way outplayed Patrick Mahomes, and yet his price dipped. $300. So I don't really get that, especially coming against a better matchup. Miami Dolphins, last time he did play them, had 3 passing touchdowns. He just kind of, like I said, going through the motions, didn't run it a ton. They were playing from ahead. 23 points is solid, but you would like to see a little bit more. It's not like that would be killer at only 7,000, but you just want to see a little bit more. Lamar Jackson, on the other hand, right below him at 68. In his return this past week, pretty solid outing, 4 passing touchdowns. We knew he wasn't going to be as much of a threat as we are accustomed to seeing with his legs, but he still got there with 25.6. We told you guys on the showdown slate, if he was playing, you got to put him in your lineup. And that's exactly what we did. And it worked out that way. Because of the lack of legs so far, maybe that just kind of gives you a little bit more confident of a pairing with the pass catchers. A lot of times running style quarterbacks, it's hard and frustrating to see who you're going to stack with. Well, maybe we can feel a little bit more comfortable, but he's always one that you can play as a standalone play as a single stack, and you can be more than fine. We'll talk about his options later because I'm assuming they're all somewhat reasonably priced because of the inconsistencies that each of those guys play. And then also Buffalo as well for what it's worth, because you never know who is going off for those specific guys. Drake May continues to just be solid, steady. Only 1 game since week 1 has he had less than 18 fantasy points. And so that was one of his worst performances of the year. His price is still mid 6K range. Going against Tampa has been fine against quarterbacks, but also because it's one of the highest totals, We've seen shootouts before against this team, and I think that's a really fun matchup to where I could be targeting both sides of this game. Really, really interesting spot. But the only thing is, once again, similar to the other two quarterbacks we just talked about, it's hard to know from a weekly basis who you're going to stack with because Booty can go off, but then Diggs could go off. But when they don't go off, there's not much of a floor there. I will say Ramondre Stevenson, that will be another name to be keeping an eye on because of the fact that he did miss this past week. Travion Henderson did inherit most of those touches. Finally had a really strong game, but did not score the touchdown. It's just worth noting because I really think that's a fun game to target, and we'll just see if we can do some inclusions of that later on. Moving down, Baker on the other side as well. New England has been really solid against the passing game in general this year, but Drake London just went off for 41, acting like prime Julio Jones this past week on the road against the Patriots. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that a possible returning Chris Godwin and Emeka Buka, the rookie sensation, who has another week of recovery due to his hammy that he's been dealing with. Maybe they get rocking and rolling, and all of a sudden it's the Bake Show returns to the fold. And after a couple duds that he's had in recent weeks, he comes back into the fold and has a really strong outing off the bye. Caleb Williams, man, he was catching passes, he was running for stuff, he was throwing for stuff. Finally had a massive boom game. He was our most exposed quarterback this past week. It really paid off. The problem was every single lineup that I played him with, I played with Rome Odunze, who had 0.0. They dropped 47 on the Bengals. Caleb Williams had 38 fantasy points, and Rome Odunze had 0.0. Football is a cruel game. I will say that, but it is what it is. DJ Moore had a really solid outing, his best outing of the season, I believe. Kias went for over 20 with the burden out. Colson Loveland, we talked about him. Cole Kmet did play before he got knocked out of the game, but Colson Loveland, his first career touchdown and then the game-winning touchdown to go for 30-plus fantasy points for just 3,300. 6K at home, weather permitting. I know weather's going to start to become a factor as we get into November and December, but 6,000, his price hasn't risen enough. And on the other side of things, Jackson Dart, where are you? 5,700. I mean, he's one of the safest quarterbacks. 5 of the last 6 games, he's had a rushing touchdown. I mean, he's been incredible as a floor. 6 straight games, at least 18 fantasy points. He's 5,700. I would anticipate that he would probably be one of the highest owned quarterbacks on the entire slate, going against the Bears, who just gave up over 400 passing yards to Joe Flacco, multiple touchdowns, and almost gave a game away that they had no business giving away. That should be a sneaky shootout. I know I didn't even mention them as one of the higher totals, which that one right now is at 47, just below the 6 I mentioned. But I would expect both of these quarterbacks to bring some ownership. Jackson Dart might be the most popular because we'll see them being on the road. $5,700, very reasonable price point. As long as the weather's holding up, obviously too early to even look into that, but that's a very, very stackable game. I just hope Rome doesn't go for 0.0 again. That would make me very sad. Sam Darnold, man. Shout out to him getting us the nuts on the primetime slate. Sam Darnold was the quarterback of the day. He was perfect from the field in the first half. Didn't have an incompletion until the third quarter. 4 touchdowns. 1 blemish was a pick, but it was when they were way ahead. They dominated the Commanders. Even before Jaden Daniels did get hurt, it was a absolutely great showing, and they're going to be a big riser because apparently they're just absolutely for real. So going against Arizona, who have confirmed that they're going to be starting Jacoby Brissett. I'm glad I got that news before we even recorded this. With Jacoby, man, he's sub 5K. I'll take it. Through all 3 of his starts. All 3 starts has been over 20 fantasy points. He's just ripping it. And the only game that he was playing from ahead, he still got for 24.8 fantasy points. Got there with a rushing touchdown. Won us some money on the showdown slate for the Monday night game as well. But at least 2 touchdowns every time. Marvin Harrison has been showing some pretty solid chemistry. They're getting him more involved. His best game of the season from top to bottom this past week. Should have had 100 yards, but Jacoby did miss him at the very end of the game. And then Trey McBride has been very solid, steady. We'll talk about him later, and we'll see how big his price tag is. But $4,600 is criminally underpriced. So I am very interested in that. And also, while we're down here, DJ Stroud got absolutely knocked out cold against the Denver Broncos. And so he had a really solid outing. And recently, he's been pretty solid. He did return, did not have a good game at all against Seattle, but that was also the game that Nico Collins left due to injury. But the other 3 games, the 3 games in between that, and they're winning 3 of those 4, going for 300 yards. Multiple touchdowns. He had a 4-touchdown game against the Ravens. Going against Jacksonville, we mentioned earlier this year, his history so far against Jacksonville, he has absolutely cooked them. And we didn't stack him way back in week 3, but we were heavy on Nico Collins, and Nico Collins back-to-back duds to start the year. And then he did hit that 100-yard threshold, did fumble, I believe, but he still got there from a fantasy perspective. So if CJ Stroud's playing $5,000, now that he's playing better, I'm in on it. I'm interested, but it's just going to be a wait and see. But Davis Mills came in and was fine. Wasn't involved in any touchdowns. He's never been much of a rushing threat. But I think that if usually we've seen the trend of backup quarterbacks coming in and just being like, who's my wide receiver one? That guy. I want to target him. And they get all the targets. And that's kind of what Nico Collins did for the most part this past week. So $4,500, very valuable play. Houston just dropped to 3-5. They lost the last game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So you don't want to get swept one. And then now if you do lose that game, the Colts 7-2. The Jags in this ever would be 6-3. All of a sudden, you'd find yourself 3.5 games back. Usually, we didn't anticipate this division bringing 2 playoff teams. It is on the board now, but it's going to be a tall task if Houston loses this game. They are slightly favored, and that is with the uncertainty of CJ Stroud. I think it's a true pick'em game. But we've been targeting Jacksonville this year from the passing game perspective, and we're fresh off a game where the intercepting leader, Geno Smith, just had a 4-touchdown effort against them in an overtime game. So that's a very kind of cheap, affordable game. Yoda brought him up earlier as a value. He's been fine. Obviously, the first game when he was minimum price, we called him out, and he panned out on that game. Was okay the following week. 17.2 is just fine as a $5,000 play. But since then, in relief games, came in relief and immediately threw a pick 6 against Dallas. And then he had another start against Kansas City, which Kansas City, they just kind of put their foot on their necks and just dominated. So 5,300, it's a better matchup. They're at home. I understand it if you wanted to go that route, at least because of his price point. He won't be chalky, I would say. But it's just worth noting, 2 of $4,800. At least he's been, I was going to say he's been playing better. He's had one great game against Atlanta. He's been pretty bad since. But it's a tied for a season low in price tag. Last time he played Buffalo, had less than 15 fantasy points. Hard to really get behind him, especially when he has no pass rushing upside. And then lastly, whatever you want to make of the Brock Purdy, Mac Jones, if Brock Purdy misses. Once again, Mac Jones had a really good outing against the Rams the last time they played. He had a season high 49 pass attempts, 2 passing touchdowns, over 300 yards against the Rams on the road in overtime. So if he's 5,000 once again, most of the games that he's played this year, he's been pretty solid as a quarterback. Half the games he's panned out in terms of value. Most of them, or at least half of them, he has not. But $5,000 is pretty cheap. Rams, I would anticipate showing up more in this game to try to get the third lick back after dropping the other matchup at home. So we have a previous history. If he plays, cool. If Brock Purdy plays in his 2-game sample size, he's had at least 18 fantasy points. He's throwing the ball. So that game is one worth building around if you want to go that route. Going on to running back, Christian McCaffrey has been matchup proof all year. Aside of this weird dud against Houston, which wasn't a good matchup, didn't really target him, but had a season low in carries. They were playing from behind the entire game. He's been awesome and matchup proof ever since. Even the Rams game, which it was a tough matchup. You saw 2.6 yards a carry. I think that's a season low. Yeah, season worse against the Rams, but he still got there with 8 for 82 and a touchdown from a receiving perspective. He's been incredible as a receiver this year. That's not a surprise. That's not shocking. He's been actually a better receiver than he has been a rusher. Way back when, he was way cheaper than he was now. He wasn't on the slate because that was a Thursday game, but $9,000 most expensive running back, and it is the worst matchup of the bunch. Meanwhile, you have other guys below him for over $1,000 cheaper that could be in better spots. We saw the Commanders. They've been hit and miss against running backs this year. Jahmyr Gibbs having his worst outing this past week against the Vikings. I would expect the Detroit Lions to turn around this week. They are a big 9-point road favorite. Those are always scared to invest in, but it is still one of the highest totals, and $8,000. His price didn't change because of that bad performance. James Cook, once again, awesome last week. 16.5. He just didn't score a touchdown, but over 100 yards. I like the fact that he's getting more and more opportunities in most of the games this year that they're playing from ahead. They're truly just saying, James Cook, you're our guy. Most of the games getting at least 20 touches. Games that they're trailing, he's not. And that could be very well a reason why. But playing from ahead, last week, his 16.5 was his lowest game that they've won this year. Every other game he's been at least 21 fantasy points. 7,500, not terrible. And the last time they played the Dolphins, went over 100 yards, 23.8 fantasy points. He might be one of the more popular running backs. And I understand exactly why if people wanted to say that. Devon Achane, he's just been the steady 16 to 20 every week, with the exception of the occasional 34. 26. And outside of that, last time he played him, roughly 20 fantasy points. Good matchup. They're just big dogs. So if you think it's a blowout, it might be a little bit scary. But if they're more competitive, like they were this past matchup, he still got 21 opportunities, had 9 targets. He just didn't do a lot with it, and he didn't score a touchdown, but still got 16 points as a floor, which is always what you like to see. Derrick Henry, risen in price, not the best matchup. Probably not really going to target him. Last week, he got over 100 yards. He's been kind of frustrating this year so far. One game that he went off against the Bills with 2 breakaway runs to get 180 all-purpose yards. But other than that, he's been pretty much a bust based on where he was going in drafts. He got there with 2 touchdowns in an inefficient performance against the Bears, who haven't been good against running backs. He got 100 yards and salvaged that because it was a long way from that. He did not work out in terms of many props that people were betting on. He was like minus 210 to score a touchdown, and that minus 210 touchdown prop went under. That's the second time that's happened because I remember he was like minus 260 in that Cleveland game and he didn't score. And that was when they had 40 plus fantasy points. Not really a good price that I wanted to get to. From Williams, on the other hand, last time he played the San Francisco 49ers, he was my play of the night, the prop of the night in that specific matchup. The frustrating part was he just didn't get there in terms of rushing yards because he had an anomaly of 10 targets. He never is a 5+ target running back, and he happened to get 10 targets, had 2 receiving touchdowns, but 32 fantasy points. He almost had a third, actually, because he did fumble at the goal line before overtime. Last week against New Orleans, got over 100 yards and a tutty to get to the 24-point threshold. His price went down despite him going against the 49ers this week. I think he could be overlooked because a lot of people I feel like will go high and low at this position. Quinshon Judkins, he's going to be one to watch against the Jets. They've been bad. They just trade their best defensive players. Rico Dowdle, his first game, they said he's the starter. We're going to give him all the workload. And guess what? He took it and ran with it. Literally over 130 yards, rushing, 2 touchdowns, 31 fantasy points in a road upset against the Packers. Now we're going against the Saints at home. Carolina's favored. And if they truly are going to give him the workload, Chuba Hubbard only had 6 opportunities. So I guess Rico just wrestled that starting gig away. And with that said, it might be the highest owned running back on the slate at only 6,300. That seems like a huge misprice based on what we just saw. I know his price rose 500, but that just is way too low if that's what we're going to see going forward. DeAndre Swift, meanwhile, he missed this past week. Another guy worth monitoring. I didn't expect him at all to not play. Going against Cincinnati, which was dead last against running backs, and hitting the way he hit in recent weeks, we had him as a core play. I played him a lot in our first looks, and he ended up not playing. And so what I did was Kyle Monangai was the main guy because Roshan was also ruled out, and I said, just play him. And guess what Kyle Monangai did? On 29 opportunities, Monangai goes for over 195 all-purpose yards, doesn't score a touchdown, but 25.8 fantasy points at just 4,600. The chalk running backs for sub 5K this year have just all worked out, and his price rose $1,000 as a result. If DeAndre Swift is out, I am locking in loading Kyle Monangai. I think he earned the role. I don't know if he's going to wrestle away the starting gig like similar to what we just saw with Rico Dowdle to Chuba Hubbard, but he's at least earned a 60-40 split at the very least. So he's still way too cheap if Swift does not play. And once again, they go from the best matchup to the second best matchup against running back. I am very much in love with Chicago as a running offense, the way that they just performed against the Cincinnati Bengals this past week. And then going down, Tyrone Tracy. This is funny because his price rose $700, which is more than the increase that Rico Dowdle had. He did nothing with his. So $5,100 last week. He wasn't as chalky as people believed. I was kind of with the field with my 20 max, but $5,800, he didn't really do a lot. And he actually did not really get the snaps that people would have thought. Last week, Devin Singletary actually outsnapped him. And Devin Singletary, who's at 4,300, outsnapped him, had 10 touches. Why did his price only rise $200? So 4,300, I mean, I'm not necessarily saying he's a must play or a cash play or a core play, but $1,500 price difference where Tyrone Tracy did not do much with his touches. He got out-touched. He got out-snapped. So why is that price that big of a gap? I don't know. Maybe they know something we don't, but I'm not interested at all at $5,800 for Mr. Tyrone Tracy. Trayvon Henderson, on the other hand, with Ramondre being out, really made the most of his touches. I was encouraged on the snap count, and that's really what mattered to me. He was sub 5K. ended up putting him in, I think, 3x to the field. Ended up with 87 all-purpose yards. He did not score a touchdown. I know Jennings poached a touchdown from him. That is annoying, but I was encouraged because of the fact that we just heard Terrell Jennings, he could have a role going forward. Trayvon Henderson's snap count was starting to dip, and then the one game without Ramondre Stevenson, Travion was 75% of the snaps. Terrell Jennings only in for 25%. So if Ramondre Stevenson doesn't play, I would anticipate that Trayvon Henderson would be in a solid matchup. $5,600 might be scare some people away, but it's a reasonable price. And I think he might get kind of squeezed because a lot of people, in the event that DeAndre Swift doesn't play, Common Guy is going to get way more ownership. And you might even see the other 6K guys really kind of make him a little lower owned than he should be. So I'm kind of interested at 5,600. Going down, Aaron Jones got hobbled this past week. He's sore but should play. I would anticipate. We'll just kind of see what happens. Shoulder injuries are kind of tricky, and it's more so a pain tolerance thing. But $5,200 against Baltimore at home, I'm okay with it. He'll be a solid tournament play, I'd say. David Montgomery, $5,000. He's a 1B. He's touchdown dependent, but $5,000 tied for a season low in price. His price didn't increase at all, despite him scoring 12 fantasy points this past week. $5,000 is not that expensive. Kenneth Walker actually, they got ahead by too much. I was similar to what I said about Trayvon Henderson, I was encouraged about the snap counts. And in this game, in a game they were playing from ahead, 57% of the snaps, which was a season best, at 13 touches. I know less than 4 yards a carry doesn't seem effective, but they didn't really run it a ton because they were just, Sam Darnold, you're literally 100% completion percentage. They just kind of rode him until the game was over, and then they just kind of pulled the starters, or at least didn't really try to. They weren't nearly as aggressive, especially in the late third throughout the entire fourth quarter. He's a season low in price. Zach Charbonnet, on the other hand, had a season low in snaps, so it's a good positive direction. And once again, Charbonnet was very, very inefficient. 5,300. I don't know if this is the matchup to really truly embrace it, but the last time we saw him against the Cardinals on Thursday Night Football, he had a season high 21 touches, had 110 all-purpose yards. He just didn't score a touchdown. So I'm not against him. I don't think he'll be highly owned. Arizona, they'll see people around this 23rd, 25th, 27th, and he might be a little overlooked, especially if those guys played. If they don't, whatever. But I don't think he'll be popular enough for the price and the role. They'll be at home. I hope one day in the near future he can be a $5 running back, but $5,300 based on that talent level is just way too cheap. And then if we're looking down, I don't really see a ton. I mentioned Devin Singletary already, but at the same time last week, we had a lot of guys ruled out that we didn't expect. With that said, think about what you want to do. Going over to the receivers, though, we have a pretty loaded slate. And once again, I think there's some fun opportunities to attack. This price already sticks out to me. I'm just going to click his name because I just mentioned him. I don't care who the quarterback is, but we targeted him on week 3 because he's killed the Jags every single time he's played, essentially. And even in a game where CJ Stroud did not play well, even in a game where they only scored 10 points, he had his best and only 100-yard game of the season so far, had tied for a season best 11 targets. And even in a game against Denver, a good defense, I know it was without Pat Surtain, but with the backup quarterback, nonetheless, going for a very formidable 11-target opportunity in his first game back off of concussion. I'm going to lock and load with a season low $6,700 in a price tag in a game where Houston just has to win this game. I'm surprised by the price, but I'm happy because last week there was a lot of expensive receivers I wanted to play. He was one of them that kind of got squeezed. He didn't really return a ton of value being a $7,100 receiver for only 14 fantasy points, but I like the opportunity, and it doesn't really matter who the quarterback is. It matters about the matchup, and $6,700 is just too cheap for Mr. Collins. Buka, he needed that bye. I'm glad that he did have the bye so shortly because he didn't miss any time due to a hamstring injury he left against the San Francisco 49ers. In the first game back, he had a 12-target game. He just hasn't gone off since then. But having that extra week off, basically a week and a half, because they didn't really do much against the New Orleans Saints, I really think it's a reasonable price tag at just $7,000. And we'll just kind of have to monitor Chris Godwin because he's on the Q tag right now. And we don't really have any update other than he remains week to week, but it's not season ending. If he doesn't play, that's a fun bully price double stack. And if it's not, that just gives you more confidence in an Emeka Egbuka. Monte Adams keeps scoring touchdowns. He has 8 touchdowns on the year already. It's just hard when you're a wide receiver 2 on the team and your price as high as he is. But last time he played San Francisco, had 11 targets, 5 for 8 was fine. He just didn't happen to score in that game. But the matchup, I think, is fine. And Puka Nacua once again got banged up. So he's optimistic he won't miss any time due to the rib injury. I think he kind of landed more so on the ball. That's what it kind of looked like to me. He basically was out the rest of the game after that injury. That's the problem with a Puka Nacua, is that he catches everything in sight, and he is a PPR monster. But every single year of his career so far, he's just not been healthy. I hope he can become a little bit more durable. I mean, it's becoming a trend now at this point that he's just banged up. And 8,700. I shouted him out last week. His price did increase. 22 points was more than fine based on going 7 for 95 in limited time. But JSN, he's the guy as of this moment. He's almost over 1,000 yards. He's probably going to hit that at this clip unless I jinx him. It is worth noting he did have a season low 79 yards against the Arizona Cardinals. I don't think he had more than one catch going into that fourth quarter, but was crucial down the stretch, especially catching that 36-yarder to set up the game-winning field goal. So I think he's a very, very solid play. The thing is, Will Johnson has been awesome so far this season as a rookie. CeeDee Lamb did fine, but not great based on his typical standards. But JSN has become almost a matchup-proof receiver. And Cooper Kupp also missed this past week against the Washington Commanders. So if he misses time, Rashid Shaheed, I don't know. He was traded to the Seahawks today. I don't know how involved he'll be in his first game with the Seahawks, but $8,600, tough price point. He might be a little squeezed. I don't know who will be the highest roster according to RotoWire, at least in terms of the price points they have. JSN is right behind Puka in terms of ownership. I would anticipate that he would be one of the more popular receivers, at least up top. Amon-Ra St. Brown has been steady, hasn't been the boom guy, but he's always been the floor receiver that you've wanted. I mean, he just gets you the weekly 18 to 20 every single week. This past week, I told you guys, he and Justin Jefferson go back and forth all season long, in their historic matchups. They didn't have fantastic games, but they both had really solid outings. JJ, the problem is just he hasn't really had a ceiling performance with JJ as the 2-game sample size, but he's scored 2 touchdowns in both of the games, at least that JJ's been fully healthy, because that Week 2 matchup is the one that JJ went down with an injury. But all these guys are viable. Don't know really how to rank them, but I think you can fit multiple of these guys, especially with the value at running back. And I'm assuming there's going to be some value at receiver after some of the trades that we saw today. So very fun and interesting, I would say. But scrolling down a little bit, Jalen Waddle has been a very solid threat, basically locked to get 75 plus yards since in games without Tyreek Hill if they're not down in bad weather against Cleveland. He's been steady. $6,400 seems very reasonable. 1 game sample with them. That was with Tyreek Hill in the fold. 5 for 39 to score. I think that's fine. Going down, though, Garrett Wilson. We'll see what happens with him. A.D. Mitchell got traded to the Jets today. And Garrett Wilson, $6,100 against the Cleveland Browns. Apparently going to resume practicing. We'll see how soon he returns. It's a decent price point, and I think people will be a little bit wary to invest in him. Amadunze dropped $600. I'm glad that he's dropping in price, but I'm very sad of this performance. Like I said, I had a ton of Caleb, and everything involved Rome. I don't know what to make of it. It's fantasy football. I like to think that it was a one-off, and there won't be much to ado about it going forward. But 3 of the 4 games since the bye, he's had less than 6 fantasy points, which is very concerning. He hasn't had a touchdown since week 4, but it is still a good matchup. $6,000, reasonable price point. I'm still interested in investing in him, and if that just brings his ownership down, I'm more than fine with it. It looks like he's less than 10% owned. That's kind of the lower of the bunch, or at least the price range that he's in. So I'm still going to be fine investing in him once again, if that's the case. Going down, you have a bunch of wide receiver 2s and 1s or inconsistent plays that all of them can be reasonable plays and go off. I mentioned Zay Flowers. I knew he was going to be under 6K. He's right at 5'9", go figure, but he's going to project well. And if you want to play Lamar Jackson, that kind of is how most people would probably start. So he's in the pool. Stephon Diggs, back-to-back games with the touchdown, but 3 of the 4 games since that big outing against the Buffalo Bills, his old team, he's had less than 50. 3 out of the 4 last games since that big Sunday night effort against his former team, the Buffalo Bills. 3 of the last 4 games, he's had under 40 receiving yards. So that's kind of concerning for a guy that is, I think, tied for his season best price point. It's been tough to trust New England receivers all year. But once again, none of these guys I can really rule out because they all have the upside, but they have lower floors, and that's kind of why they are in the price range they are. Terry McLaurin re-injured his quad, and last week, Deebo Samuel was the wide receiver one. We saw a pretty solid sample of success with him as just the only guy without Terry McLaurin in the fold. Back-to-back 20-point games with him. The Chicago game, weird weather game. Don't really know what to make of it. And then last week they were getting shit on by the Seahawks in a tough matchup. So better matchup this week against the Detroit Lions, $5,600 at home. I think he's very reasonable to put in some lines. I would expect Terry McLaurin to miss a few more weeks at the very least. DJ Moore, he's in best game by far. Don't know if it was an anomaly. He also threw a touchdown. He ran for a touchdown. He didn't receive a touchdown, but 4 for 72 was one of his better outings of the year. And I hope he can build on it because I have a lot of him in best ball. So he's fine. Chris Godwin, up in the air on if he plays. Ricky Pearsall, I thought would be a good target to return this week. But at the same time, it doesn't sound like there's a ton of optimism he's officially back this week. They just said we're going to reassess in the middle of the week. $5,400 is a fine price point. I don't think, he missed his first game that he did miss was against the very Los Angeles Rams. So $5,400 is fine. But I think you could probably get away with doing better because I think the 5K price range is pretty loaded this week. Jordan Addison had a pretty strong rapport with Carson Wentz, but in his first game sample with JJ McCarthy in the fold, 5 opportunities, 64 yards was fine. It's a good matchup. It is worth mentioning Baltimore's defense is playing much better, though. It's kind of hard to have confidence say in him. If you're playing a ton of lines, yeah, he's in the pool, but if I'm playing 3 to 5, I don't know if I can really get to him at that price. Wandale, he is going to have by far the best opportunity for the Giants receiver. It just depends on if he can go off, but 2 of the last 3 games, at least 11 targets, which is fun. 3 of the last 4 games, at least 13 fantasy points. His price just is kind of staying in the low 5K range. Marvin Harrison, still we've confirmed that it's going to be Jacoby Brissett at the fold. His one game against Seattle was statistically one of his best games of the season. He had a bad first half, was part of the reason that they helped come back 6 for 66 in the score. And then coming off a 10-target effort where they just peppered him this past week, like I said, he should have gone over 100 yards, and Jacoby missed him for like another 15 to 20-yard gain late in the game. But his price hasn't jumped as a reflection, mostly because of the fact that Dallas, that game was on Monday night. But $5,300, one of the lower prices on the season. I think he's once again in the pool, and he's just going to keep breaking my heart because I'm going to keep on playing him. Hopefully, he can just have a little bit more consistency. Jacoby Myers trades to Jacksonville today. He's $4,800. It's not a great matchup, but Jacksonville, it's kind of an unknown. Travis Hunter on IR. And Brian Thomas, I mentioned him as a stackable option. Once again, he has just been not good at all this year. And he apparently, I didn't watch much of this game, but he did drop apparently another 30, 40 yarder to get him close to that 100-yard threshold. But he also got banged up. He left the game due to a high ankle sprain. It is low grade, but it sounds like there's a chance he could play. If he does play, I'm not really interested in him at this point anymore. And then also, if he does or does not play, that really kind of helps you determine whether or not you're going to invest in these guys. Jacoby, first game with the team. We'll just kind of see what happens. But Parker Washington, it was between him and Diami, and we made the right call of going with Parker Washington. 8 of his 9 targets he did catch for a season best 90 yards. 19 targets in the last 2 games. He's playing a lot of snaps in those games as well. His price rose up $1,000, but you just have the uncertainties because of Brian Thomas, whether or not he plays. And then also, I have no idea what the role will be for Jacoby Myers in the first game with the team. Going down, I mean, a couple of names are going to project well. You have Juwan Jennings, who I think he missed. Yeah, he also missed the Rams game in addition to, and that was the Kendrick Bourne game where he went off for, what did he go off for? 10 for 142, a season and career best. He tied it the very next week also, 142 back-to-back games. But if Ricky Pearsall doesn't play, I would anticipate him being a fine play. Last week, we kind of were uncertain about playing him. He only had 5 opportunities, but did catch a touchdown, almost caught a second one, but it's a fine price point. You also have Darius Slayton in another solid matchup, 5 for 62 yards. Back-to-back games, he's either dropped or there's been a long touchdown that could have been had that ended up not happening. It's been frustrating in that regard, but it's a very reasonable price point. Malik Washington is also just playing snaps, and he'll have wide receiver 2 opportunities, but you don't have a ton of confidence. Tournament play, though. And then going down, I don't think there's really anything in the 4K and below range that really stands out as of this moment. I know there was injury issues and news. A.D. Mitchell, his first game with the Jets. If Garrett Wilson doesn't play, $3,000. I mean, I'll take a flyer on him to afford a couple other guys up top. That's minimum price. A.D. Mitchell, I'm fine with that. I'm not opposed to it. Yeah, I can get behind that. And in wise, it's really Trey McBride up top, and then the rest. In his game against Seattle, he had 11 targets, caught 7 for 52, was solid. But the rapport with Jacoby Brissett cannot be understated. 3 starts, 4 touchdowns. He has not been a touchdown guy with Kyler Murray. Last year, he infamously had over 100 targets. I think he had like 100 plus catches as well, and then caught his first touchdown of the year. He had a fumble recovery touchdown and a rushing touchdown before his first receiving touchdown, which came in week 16, if I remember correctly, or week 17. Either way, it was late in the year. But $6,000, it's fine, especially if Jacoby Brissett we know is starting. Doing a quick, just run back the same stack we did on Monday night with Jacoby Brissett, Trey McBride, and Marvin Harrison, and just let the world watch you make money, is how I would say it. George Kittle, he hasn't had a ton of opportunities, to be honest, since he's returned. All 3 games, he's been 5 opportunities or less, and he did catch a touchdown in week 8. But other than that, he's talented. He's going to project well because people know he's talented, but we haven't seen him pop off. He can against the Rams, but you just want to see a little bit more opportunity. You never know, though. And then back to back guys, statistically good matchups. They're the same prices. Sam Laporta, early on, I think he had most of that in the first quarter. 6 for 97 was his best game of the season, plus that touchdown. He's been a good touchdown threat as well. It's a stackable game, one of the highest totals. Completely understand it. And then Dalton Kincaid, I'm mad, honestly, that I went away from him because I had a lot of Mahomes stacks, and I organically was like, I'm going to go with some Colston Loveland. I'm going to go with a lot of Brock Bowers. I was not wrong in those decisions, but I also should have also still played Dalton Kincaid because I had double tight end lineups. I played some George Kittle that didn't work out. Kincaid, his second game in his last 3 with over 100 total yards, and then he also got that touchdown. So he's got 4 touchdowns on the year. I believe that's already a career or a season personal best. And so he's been lights out when he's played. Going against Miami, the last time he did play Miami, he had 5 for 66 in the score. So good track record, good matchup, and good price. Harold Fannin, before the bye, 2 of the 3 games, he had at least 8 targets. Touchdown. He's very fair and safe. The only thing is he also is going to be playing with David Njoku, who surprisingly, he did not get traded at the trade deadline. I'm surprised by the price also because they've been playing a lot of snaps together. In all but one of the games this year, both of them have played at least 59% of the snaps. David Njoku, that's a very reasonable price for a guy that's been on the field. At least the floor has not been there that you would have expected, but no one expected Harold Fannin to overtake him as a tight end 1 on the team in terms of opportunities, but they're both in the pool. It's against the Jets once again for the 3rd time. Traded away everybody or their best 2 defensive players, so it's worth mentioning. Cade Otton, especially if Chris Godwin doesn't play. Last 4 games, all of them having at least 40 yards, has had at least 5 targets in every game. He just has not scored a touchdown this season. So $3,900 home game. Bottom five against tight ends are the New England Patriots, so he's in the pool. I'm not falling for this again. This pissed me off. I'm going to be honest. So Seattle, he goes for a season best 9 for 98. Follow that up. He was the chalk of the week in week 8. And there was like 8 guys that caught a pass before Dalton Schultz did. He was on the field too. But then he caught his second pass and missed the rest of the game, I believe due to injury. Came back the following week and then 6 for 77 on 8 targets. And that was with Nico Collins back. That's annoying as hell, but it's a good matchup. And last time he did play the Jacksonville Jaguars, at least had 5 for 39, which is fine and reasonable for $3,600. Going down, there's some pretty valuable tight ends. Hunter Henry has been on the field one. Also inconsistent, but he's on the field a lot. And Taylor, he's been very solid and steady. Weird game that he had 1 catch on 1 target against Denver overseas. But in the games that within this past game before their bye, in a 39-38 comeback win, caught a touchdown, his first of his young career, and his price hasn't really risen for being a guy that's going to be a top 2 or 3 option in the offense for the rest of the season since they held on to Breece Hall. And A.D. Mitchell, we'll see what kind of revelation he'll have. Mason Taylor for $200 more when you know he's going to have a role is worth mentioning. T.J. Hawkinson, his price keeps going down. I hate the fact that he's just not in a high volume passing offense because he's too talented to be $3,300. Caught his second touchdown of the season, but also had a season low 11 receiving yards. So don't really know what to do with him going forward, but it's really tough to invest in at this point, especially when there's a bunch of value at tight end. Isaiah Likely was a guy that in the showdown we really were talking about being the 2K tournament play. He was popular, but he still had a really good game with 60 receiving yards on 3 catches, but there were 3 receiving tight ends of the tight end position, and he was not one of them. It's just one of those things where it's annoying, but he paid off in terms of his value. I think on the Thursday, Monday, so I will take 9 fantasy points all day for $2,600. And also, he's on the field. So last 2 games has been 58, 59% of the snaps, which cumulatively has been most among the tight ends on the team. He's $2,900. Lamar's back, and he's usually had a better track record with Lamar Jackson in the fold. So $2,900, I think, is a pretty solid tournament play. I'd say let's start building some lines. I always go to the defense first, and I try to see which one of these bottom feeders works out. Last week, I told you it was gross, and in most of the first looks, I was like, let's just play Carolina. In the grand scheme of things, that probably looked like a stupid idea, but it worked out based on the win, allowing only 13 points. And I can even show you nine fantasy points altogether. Didn't really have a ton of stats. They just allowed 13 points and were really solid. And minimum price, you will take that every single day. But the rest of these options, Commanders, I would assume Detroit would be a 30-point lock this week, so it's hard to trust them. Buffalo's kind of played down to their competition this year. Miami also has not been good in a lot of regards defensively, and they also traded away one of their pass rushers today. So tough to trust. Arizona's defense, I might be interested in. Seattle, that was a game where they basically came back and almost won the game. 5 fantasy points is fine. Seattle has been playing lights out, but this is one of those make or break games. Coming off a momentous win on the road against the Cowboys, maybe they want to try to get their lick back against Seattle, who stole it back at the end. For $2,200, they're very reasonable. New Orleans against Bryce Young sounds terrible, but you don't really love or trust Carolina to just go off for 30. And I don't think that they really have, other than going against Miami or Dallas, who have been some of the worst offenses. In the games outside of that, was one of the weirder anomaly games as well, the Atlanta game. But with that said, other than that, 13 points, 9 points, 16 points scored. So they're not a high scoring offense. And even if I have an interest in Rico Dowdle, I don't care. $2,400, I'll take that price. $2,400, I don't really care. I'll take that price. I wouldn't be shocked if New Orleans was competitive in this game too. So the Giants against the Bears, sure, I can get behind it. The Patriots defense has been awesome all year. The Falcons, they just didn't have any stats. But other than that, you see multiple double-digit point scoring games. So $2,600, that's fine. Probably basically any team that has a chance to win and is not a lock to give up over 30 is probably the direction I'm really leaning towards. But I think there's a couple options. Saints, Cardinals, even the Jags, I think is a fine one as well. Going against Houston, last time they played, only allowed 10 fantasy points. Also could be playing against Davis Mills. And if that's the case, they might be one of the more popular defenses. I think there's a few names this week actually that I like down low. And because of that, I'll probably, be wrong a lot. But at least some that I can mix and match and feel a little better about at the very least. Kicking it off, let's start off with a dominant stack up top. Let's do a Josh Allen stack because $7,000 just seems too cheap. We're going to put in Dalton Kincaid because he scored last time. It's a good matchup. And he's starting to develop some chemistry. And then once again, Khalil Shakir is just going to live in the 5K range. I might be fine getting away with a single stack of the Buffalo Bills. And if that's the case, I'm going to bring that back with a Jalen Waddle. Let's go to running back. Let's do a couple of minor running backs. So we'll go Rico Dowdle, who might be one of the more popular running backs on the slate, like I mentioned. And let's go down low. Let's play some pretend and say Kyle Manunga is going to start again. DeAndre Swift, they'll rest him another week because they were so impressed by Kyle's performance. It's another great matchup. They're at home. He would, in turn, if Swift misses, be a 5-box running back for under 5K. If Swift misses, he'll be a 5-box running back for under 6K. So lock and load. And I would play the hell out of this tandem if we were going to go that route. And then, honestly, 6,000 per the rest of the way, I think is a pretty reasonable way to go about things. Let's go down. Let's see if we can even try to open up a little more value. We can go down to let's say Juwan Jennings against the Los Angeles Rams. And then the last two guys in, that's one more short that I had the idea of. But Nico Collins, I was trying to aim up for a Mecca. We could squeeze down $100 more somewhere, right? You got Kendrick Bourne. Say that Ricky Pearsall misses once again. Darius Slayton as a bring back of Kyle Manunga, that could get you there as well. That's a pretty solid first look with a dominant quarterback build. Single stack, bring back. Let's try to bring him back this time with Devon Achane. I'm fine doing a 3 running back build in this scenario just to save some time, but let's go Devon Achane. And then you got Rome if you wanted to play two Chicago players. Rashid Shaheed being traded, maybe a Chris Olave that opens up even more opportunity. Ironically, he had his lowest output of the season in terms of opportunity this past week. Or you could go as a standalone play with one of these low 5K guys. I'm totally fine with doing that as well. Let's just go ahead and put in Zay Flowers. That's fine. High scoring. I would anticipate the Ravens kind of getting back on track and becoming a highly potent offense because they average over 30 with Lamar in the fold. Totally fine as well. Next up, let's go down low again. Jacoby Brissett at 4,600. That just seems very, very fun and enticing. And we're easily going to double stack him with the two main guys because he finds a way to get his best 2 players the ball. And that's what Kyler should be doing as well. And I don't know why he was not. This time I'm going to go with the Saints defense. And like I said, I don't love doing running back against the opposing defense, but I don't really care at these price points. He's $1,000 too cheap based on his new role, if this role is the role it is going forward. And the Saints, I'm not fearful of them just getting shit on by the Panthers. They're not scoring a ton of points unless it's against 2 of the worst defenses in the NFL. And I know the Saints defense has been bad, but they haven't been atrocious. I mean, they gave up 34 this past week against the Rams. A lot of people are going to give up 34 against the Rams. But other than that, I think that was their only game in the last 4 that they haven't allowed 28 fantasy points. But outside of that, the previous 4, they didn't allow more than 28 points. And because of that -1 scoring for giving up 28 points, if you don't think Carolina's going to score 28, I think that's perfectly fine. Try to get you 5 points and just see where you can spend elsewhere. This time, let's go to another running back this time. Let's go on the other side of Buffalo and say it's James Cook that gets it going. It could be a standalone play. It doesn't really matter, but he went off. If you're going to give him 25 opportunities, he's going to pan out in a big, big way. And then also, instead of going with a Kyle Manunga in this lineup, let's say Rome Odunze gets back on track and it's still a good matchup. People will probably be turned off by the fact that he just shit the bed this past week. And let's just say lock and load and let's play him and find out what happens. And then last guy in, you got Rashid Shaheed in his first game with Seattle. I don't really care for that. As a standalone play, Joe Montgomery in the late game, I feel like he's just going to be – he never is really that highly owned on main slates like this. If I look at the ownership, at least what RotoWire is showing right now, less than 10% owned. Last guy in, 3 o'clock game. I mean, why not? If you didn't want to do that, you didn't trust Nico with a possible backup quarterback or with CJ Stroud for that matter, you could go down and try to get 2 mid-tier receivers. So that's the Zay Flowers range once again. You can try to put in Jalen Waddle. You could also try to get let's say, Deebo Samuel once again. I'd like to get some Detroit in this game as well, going against the Commanders who are starting to just put up a ton of points. I would try to get some Detroit because of how Washington's defense is starting to just give up a ton of points in recent games. They just gave up 28 to the Chiefs in what I would consider a C-plus effort, 38 against Seattle at home. You had Chicago notably getting 25 in a bad weather game. You had 34 dropped on by Atlanta. So they've given up some points this year, and I don't anticipate that Detroit would be a threat to not score 30 this week, and especially in a game after they just dropped a division game at home. So they're going to be wanting to get back on track. So let's see if we can try to find a way to make some Detroit lines happen in this line. Let's go to Deebo Samuel. Maybe that goes all the way down. Maybe this is a double tight end line since you went with Trey McBride. I'm completely fine with that. That's worked out for us this year. It could be a standalone play with Gate Otten. We can go down to a Dalton Schultz, or we can try to spend up to a. Let's go down from James Cook. Let's go back to Kyle Monangai. 5,800. That's back to the mid-tier guys. It could be Stephon Diggs. It could be Travis Etienne, who went for, I mean, it's not a great matchup, but it's worth mentioning. Let's say Ramondre Stevenson's out and Travion Henderson gets the bulk of the carries once again. And maybe he scores this time in a higher scoring affair. That's fine as well. I think the Arizona stacks I might be tricked into it, but I think I'm pretty shocked by those price points. And I know why they are the way they are, but I just think it is worth mentioning. Caleb Williams, let's do a quick build with him. Roma Dunze, I know Colston Loveland went off $4,100 now. It's kind of like, was that a one-off or was it just this is a sign of things to come? Cole Kmet got concussed, so if he's out, he's going to play 80% of the snaps once again. $4,100. I guess that makes you feel a little better, but I'm just fine doing this. I'm going to just have a hunch that DeAndre Swift's going to miss time this week. So if that's the case, let's put those guys back in. Let's put a cheap defense in once again. This time, I actually don't know how I want to rank this range, but Kittle, Laporta, Kincaid, Fannin, they can all go off. They could all pop off. I think tight end ownership could be spread out, other than Trey McBride probably pulling in some of the most. But we'll see what happens because I think he's also been overlooked as a high end. People have been wanting to play the mid-price tight ends all year. But let's go with Sam Laporta, get some Detroit action. I told you that I wanted to get some exposure to that side. Bring that back with Deebo Samuel, who I would expect to be the clear-cut wide receiver one on that team, and a strong 2-game sample with Marcus Mariota and then without Terry McLaurin. You got $6,900 remainder. That's a fun range. And once again, this time, get back to that Nico and Emeka Ibuka. If you didn't like Nico Collins, you can get up to a Derrick Henry. You can go down to a Kyron, up to a Bucky if you even wanted that much. Or we can try to live in the middle a little bit at receiver as well. Let's try to afford another dominant receiver again. Yeah, I think this is a really solid price range for both of these guys. They're wide receiver ones, clear cut on their own teams. It is a direction that I don't think a lot of people are going to go because I think a lot of people are going to want to try to fit the Pukas, the JSNs, the Christian McCaffreys, Amon-Ra St. Browns, like these high priced guys. Your highest priced guy on this team, 7,000. And yet there's not a single guy on this team in this scenario that you really feel uncomfortable about other than Rome. Can you not have just 0.0? For the most part, he's been steady as a wide receiver one outside of a couple of rough games. So I want to see some better action. And maybe since he's lower owned, I can invest in him again with a good matchup. Let's go on the other side of that game because, like I said, I think Jackson Dart will be pretty chalky. And if he is going to be, then let's lock and load with him. By default, Wan'Dale Robinson. And then let's say Kamanungai once again. I won't put Rico Dowdle in. Oh, I actually put in Trayvon. Kamanungai, go back in. This time I won't put in Rico Dowdle. Try to fit it a little bit different around. Let's say Kyron Williams has another game. I think one of the stats I said was he had 3 of the last 4 games, at least 100 all-purpose yards against the Niners. He's had 2 multi-touchdown efforts in the last couple seasons against the very 49ers. It's a good rapport. They're going to try to not be swept by that team in a game that could be whoever's leading this game or whoever wins this game will be first place coming out of this week. Let's bring it back with George Kittle, who did not play in that last matchup. And then these last guys in, you could really afford a lot of stuff. Let's go mid-price guy, Marvin Harrison. $7,300 remainder. You've got Nico, last guy in. That is enough for Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, James Cook. If you wanted James Cook, you could go up to Emeka Ibuka instead of Nico Collins. That's a pretty solid lineup as well. I know I didn't do a double stack, but Jackson Dart, his main fantasy relevance has been his ability to get rushing touchdowns, have rushing upside. Hasn't been a high volume passing attack. Only once in the last 5 games has he had more than 200 hit passing yards. In his 6 starts, he's actually only had one of those games. It was against the Denver Broncos. So in a game where he had less than 50% of the completion. I don't think you really have to double stack if you're going the Jackson Dart route. If everybody plays him, they're likely just going to pair him with Wan'Dale. So find ways to get different if you're going to do that. And that is a Kyron Williams who's just kind of stuck in the middle as a running back. Marvin Harrison, we'll see what his ownership is. Maybe George Kittle, because of a dud this past week, has some lower ownership. I don't know. I like it. There's a lot of ways to get different. Last lineup, let's try to build a double stack with Detroit, because Jared Goff, sub 6K, season low price. That's fun as well. Against the game, like I said, I think because of the fact that they just dropped a home game against the very Minnesota Vikings coming out of a bye, they're going to play pissed off, and Sam Darnold just went for 4 touchdowns in the first half against these very Commanders. So sub 6K is very reasonable. And if I'm going to double stack Jared Goff, that's basically starting with this guy and then figuring out, am I going to go Jameson Williams, who has been pretty much a dud based on where he was drafted this year. In games that he's gone off and scored touchdowns, it's been fine. He's sub 5K. And I think it might just be the approach of, do I go the lower owned Detroit Lions? So Jameson Williams pulling in less than 10% owned. Sam Laporta might be one of the highest owned tight ends. It looks like he's the second highest according to RotoWire. So let's go a little different and go Jameson Williams. Bring back wise, let's go Debo. Pretty easy, self-explanatory. I guess Zach Ertz is an honorable mention. Let's try to afford Trey McBride in this one. Go down a defense, Arizona. That's New Orleans. Like I said, I think there's a decent amount of cheap defenses this week. 5,600, I think is pretty easy to know where I'm going. That's Rico Dowdle. It's Common Unguy. And then last guy in, 4,900. You could place him, pretend that Quinshawn's going to be out. Dylan Sampson on the road against the Jets without their best run defender, who was the number one interior run defender this season, Quinnen Williams, and then also Sauce Gardner. That doesn't matter in terms of that specific matchup, but that's the last guy in. If you didn't like that, you could go up to the next best tight end, which is George Kittle. I don't mind at all ever going double tight end. You could go Parker Washington or Jacoby Myers if you have a lean on the Jacksonville receiver, especially if Brian Thomas is either hampered or inactive in this game. Or if you wanted to go last guy in, and yeah, to be honest, I'll probably side with, in this specific build for the time being, saying Dylan Sampson, pretending that Quinton Judkins is out. But let's pretend, or let's do another look I'll throw at you, because I haven't put in Sam Laporta. Let's do Sam Laporta as the secondary option in this double stack. And then that opens up another receiver position. That's Rome Odunze. Last guy in, Marvin Harrison. For my fantasy leagues and lineups, that'll make it pretty exciting. You could also go at the same price. You could go Kenneth Walker. But Marvin Harrison, good rapport so far with Jacoby Brissett in the games that they've played together. So that's fine and fun. I want to go down a little bit of defense with Arizona. That affords you up to 5,600, which is Trayvon Henderson. That's DJ Moore as well. More than fine with that if you want to go that route. Let's say you wanted to go off of Common Unguy, say DeAndre Swift plays, but you don't love playing DeAndre Swift. That's Kyron Williams. Then that's back to a Juwan Jennings realm or area. That's fine as well. I think that's fine. Plus, that's a correlated bring back in that game. But with that said, guys, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. That is all I got for you today. We appreciate you tuning in. Please like, comment, subscribe. Tell us how you're really approaching this slate, because I think there's a different amount of directions you can go. Pretty affordable slate, to be honest. There's not a whole lot that last week there was just studs all over, and you had to make some really tough decisions. This week, I think you can build pretty balanced, but also there's ways to afford up top. I didn't even mention AD Mitchell in a first look line, but $3,000 minimum price for a guy that could inherit snaps. It is wishful thinking, but it opens up a ton if you spent $3,000 for a receiver. But I'm excited to see what happens on the slate. Fingers crossed we can get some vehicle situation handled so I can get that live stream going for you guys this Sunday. Hopefully we can. Check out our college football content. We're going to be reacting to a lot of stuff going forward. We are in the month of November now. I'm excited to be rocking and rolling, and I can't wait to see what's going to transpire going forward. So with that said, guys, we will see you on the next one.